Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, or if it's your very first time here, welcome on in. I am back with a bit of a different video. I have been wanting to start doing more journal with me's on this channel, and I've also been wanting to do a Q&A for the longest time. I actually proposed the idea of doing a Q&A months ago, and I just have not gone around to doing it, but today is going to be that day. So I figured this would kind of be the best opportunity to answer some questions about journaling or small business or any other questions you might have while doing some journaling. So this is actually a journal I really haven't shown too much. I know I haven't shown this at all on YouTube, but this is my 5-star reads journal, essentially a journal filled with mood board-esque spreads that are dedicated to my 5-star reads. The journal that I use is this Traveler's Size from Archer & Olive. This is one of the journals that I've had for the longest time, and I just couldn't figure out what I wanted to use it for. Before I get started, I can go ahead and show you what I've done so far. So I started working on this journal last year, but I just love creating an entire spread dedicated to books that I really loved, with quotes or just the overall vibe that the book gives off as well. I did an entire spread for the Hollows Row series by Trisha Wolfe because I believe this is the first series where I've given every single book 5 stars. This is one of my favorite series I have ever read, clearly. And this one was actually a recent one I did over on my Patreon. I do monthly journal with me's, so if you want even more chill or chatty journal with me sessions, feel free to hop on over to my Patreon. The link is always in my bio. But this was actually a 5-star read from last year that I had forgotten about, and that is something we're also going to work on today. So I have 2 books that I'm going to be doing spreads for, and these, ironically enough, both take place in space. We have Thrum by Meg Smitherman, which is a novella, and then Dead Silence by S.A. Barnes. Thrum was a 5-star read from last year, another book that I forgot to do a spread for, so we're going to do that today. And Dead Silence is the first 5-star read of 2025 for me, and I just thought this would be kind of perfect to include in the same video because they are both sci-fi horrors, which is a genre that I really have fallen in love with, honestly, because of Thrum. And I've also read some other sci-fi horrors over the past few months as well, but these do have hands down been my favorites. So while I create these spreads for both of these books, we're going to cut to the voiceover so I can answer some of the questions that were asked quite a number of months ago. So yeah, I hope you enjoy a bit of a different video. Let me know if you want to see more journal with me's. If you enjoy the chatty format, I also want to do more of like a chill journal with me with just some cozy music. But yeah, let me know, and I hope you enjoy. Alrighty, hello everyone. Voiceover Savannah here. We are going to get into some of these questions. They come from both Instagram and YouTube. Some of them are from when I originally asked for questions like 10 months ago, which is so bad. I did not realize how long I've been sitting on this video idea. I feel so bad. If you're still here from when I originally asked that question, thank you so much. And then there are a few questions which I have asked recently. So we are going to start with the first question, which is, of course, when did I first start journaling? I started journaling in 2019, and I've mentioned this a few times previously, but I unfortunately do not have my original bullet journal, if I would honestly even call it that. I ended up losing that journal somehow when we moved to a different apartment, but if you want to see any of those spreads, I was uploading to Instagram at the time as well. So if you just scroll all the way down my feed, you can see all of my posts from my 2019 bullet journal, which is drastically different from what my journal looks like now, but it's an evolution, you know, it was an experimental phase for sure, but I will always cherish that journal, and I'm so sad that I don't have it anymore. But yeah, I started journaling in 2019. I was just trying to reconnect with my creative self. I feel like I lost that part of me a little bit in college, and I was just looking for another creative outlet, and I heard that there was this somewhat newer form of journaling called bullet journaling, with a bit more of like a creative twist, and I thought I'd give it a go, and well, I guess the rest is history. The next question is, what is your favorite memory of journaling? This is kind of a tough question to answer because I can't really think of one specific instance throughout my bullet journaling adventure that has been my favorite. I mean, I have favorite themes and spreads and stuff like that, but I couldn't really think of one specific instance that has been my favorite memory. However, I think my favorite part about journaling so far for me actually was last year's journal. My 2024 bullet journal is my favorite journal I've ever done, but what makes it my favorite, I guess you could say, memory is that it's finished. It is the first time I have completed a bullet journal, and I didn't skip any months, any spreads, and I don't know, that was just so rewarding for me. I've been doing this for quite a number of years, and I've fallen into, you know, a bunch of creative slumps, and there were points where I just didn't feel like journaling, and last year was the very first year where I didn't feel any of that. So I guess you could call that a memory, or maybe just my favorite moment in journaling so far is just having a completed journal. The next question that someone asked is how long it takes me to do a spread, and I actually get this question quite a bit. The short answer is that it honestly depends. There are some days where it only takes me an hour to do a spread, and there are some times where it takes me way longer. I think it just depends on how intricate the spread is. For example, a cover page spread for a monthly setup is always going to take a long time because that's where I usually tend to be the most detailed. But if we're just talking about a mood board spread like this, I believe this took me a little bit under an hour, but on average, most spreads take me an hour to do. I know that does sound like a really long time, but this is actually an improvement for me because I used to spend way more time on a single spread because I wouldn't pre-prepare myself for journaling, if that makes sense. So what I used to do, and I don't know why it took me so long to break out of this habit, is that I wouldn't gather my supplies ahead of time for a spread. So essentially what would happen is that I would sit down with my journal, and then throughout the process of journaling, I would get up and go and get the supplies I needed instead of having everything ready to go next to me. But I honestly feel like that mentality needed to change because I started filming my setups and posting on YouTube and doing long form content. So I really needed to force myself to be more efficient with my time. And that meant getting my supplies next to me ahead of time so I wouldn't have to waste precious seconds getting up and looking for a specific stationery item. With all that being said, though, I am still a relatively slow journaler. I take my time. I use a lot of different ephemeras and details, which adds on to the time it takes for me to do a single spread. So by no means, please don't hear like an hour and think that that's how long it's going to take you to do a journal spread. It is solely dependent on what kind of spread you're creating. But I would say on average, at least an hour, which sounds really bad, but that's the truth. that kind of brings us to another question. Do you plan out your spreads beforehand? This is a yes and also a no. I do plan out my spreads in terms of theming, in terms of supplies, in terms of like the general idea of what I want the spread to be, but I do not plan the layout. I am very much I guess you could say, free spirit when it comes to journaling. I do a lot of collage and ephemera heavy spreads, if it wasn't already obvious. And I feel like you can't really plan that to an extent. So I just kind of come up with a general idea of maybe what I roughly want the page to include, and then go from there and kind of let the stickers and ephemeras speak to me in totally not a weird way. And then I just go with it. It's very much a go with the flow kind of situation, which, as I mentioned earlier, does cause a bit of a lengthy time for creating spreads. Moving on to the next question, would you consider doing studio vlogs on your channel? So as of this current recording, I have 2 studio vlogs up on my channel, actually. And the reason I don't have more is because any footage that I take in regards to my small business ends up turning into a studio vlog over on my Patreon. I do a monthly studio vlog, and I've been doing that for almost a year, if not a year now at this point. And because my small business life isn't super chaotic currently, I don't realistically have enough footage to spread out over Patreon and YouTube. So I have just been dedicating everything to my Patreon members. I do hope to add more small business related content for this channel, but it isn't a priority as of right now. Like, I just don't have enough to show, I guess. So if you do want to see some studio vlogs and a little bit more into my personal life and my day-to-day, all of that is on Patreon. The next question someone asked is, have you thought about creating a journal to sell in your shop? Yes, I have. This has been a goal of mine for the past, I would say, 2 years. It has been a very slow process because there have just been things that have kind of forced me to put that on the back burner. My initial goal was to actually release my journal commissions last year, like around September, October, but then I ended up getting into Rose City Comic Con and attending their artist alley, and all of my time ended up being dedicated towards that. And the way I wanted my journal commissions to go is that they would essentially be a year in advance or a half a year in advance. So once I ended up losing 2 months more from 2024, I could no longer like essentially work on 2025 journal commissions. It just wasn't going to be possible. So long story short, yes, it is still something that I really want to do. I feel like it'd be so much fun to work on a journal for someone else. But there's just a lot that goes into it. It's going to take a lot of time, and I also don't want to sacrifice like my own journal for it too, if that makes sense. But it is still something I really hope to put into fruition sooner rather than later. The next question is in regards to my favorite themes or spreads that I've ever created. This is a video idea I have, so I do plan to elaborate a lot more on this. But as of right now, my favorite themes that I have ever done are probably Hocus Pocus from 2022, My May Galaxy from 2024, Monet from 2021, and Winterwood from 2020. As of right now, those are the ones that stand out to me the most, and I definitely plan to elaborate more on a bunch of these themes in that specific video, but I hope that kind of answers your question. As far as favorite spreads, that is a whole other can of worms that I have to dive into. I'm going to have to look at all of the spreads that I've ever done to see which one is specifically my favorite as far as like habit trackers and mood trackers. I feel like that would be just a cool video to kind of go down memory lane in a way and see what I've created over the past 5 or 6 years. This next question asks about my 5 Holy Grail journaling supplies. I'm not going to include the journal itself for this question. I'm just going to talk about the 5 accessories that I use the most in tandem with my journal. The first being alphabet stamps, which you can see in this video. It's probably in 90% of my videos. I use them so much. One of the best purchases I've ever made for my journals. I just don't always want to write words, you know, and the alphabet stamps create a cool vibe that I love 99% of the time. So alphabet stamps is the first Holy Grail item. The next is roll-on glue. This I literally use 100% of the time. And I think because I use so much ephemera, this is literally a must-have product for me. I can't tell you the amount of times where I finished a roll of glue and forgot to order more, so I just couldn't continue journaling that day. Like, I don't have glue sticks, and I'm not going to use Elmer's glue because it's just going to make a mess. So I have to wait for my Amazon order to come in with more roll-on glue. As far as specific brands, I know that Tombow does one, but I've just been using AdTech for the longest time. So yeah, glue. Moving on, the next 2 items are pens. The first being the Writech Up Gel pen. This is my favorite pen of all time. It dries so fast. It is so smooth to write with. It's just the best pen I've ever used. I don't know what else to tell you. I will buy packs and packs and packs of these pens for as long as I can continue to write. My favorite pens, hands down. Next is the Sakura White Jelly Roll pen, which recently, I mean, like, I've used this pen for quite a number of years, but I have used this pen. This pen has been used and abused over the past year because of my Black Page bullet journal from 2024. It's just so far the best white gel pen that I have found. Now, specifically, it has to be the Jelly Roll in size 8 or 10. I find that the one in size 5 tends to be a little bit inconsistent with application. It skips sometimes, but I don't really get that with the other sizes. So yeah, Sakura White Jelly Roll pen. If you're in the market for a white gel pen, this is the way to go. And the final item, or I guess I would say set of items, because I can't really do one without the other, is my coffee ink staining kit. So the coffee stain stencil with the blending tool and the distressed ink, that kind of whole kit in itself is one stationary item for me. This has just been one of my favorite items to add like a very cozy, vintagey look to a ton of my spreads, and I've been using this item for a number of years at this point. And it's just one of my favorites. Is it a need? No, it's not to the point of, you know, needing glue, but it's just one of my favorite items. I love it so much. So yeah, those are my 5 Holy Grail journaling supplies. Alrighty, the next question is, how did I learn to edit my videos? So I use Adobe Premiere Pro for all of my editing shenanigans, and I first learned about Premiere Pro in one of my college classes about video production. It was the class that showed me how much I love video editing. It is honestly such a passion of mine. I love seeing things come together. It's just so much fun for me. So to be able to do this as kind of like a career almost, and that's just been extremely rewarding, especially because my initial reason for taking that class was that I hoped to have some sort of career in filmmaking, but now I make journaling videos for YouTube, and I couldn't be happier. But yeah, essentially all of my beginner knowledge about Premiere Pro came from that class, and since then I have learned a lot of things on my own, watched a few tutorials here and there, but I have also taken a handful of classes on Skillshare who are kindly sponsoring today's video. In case this is your first time hearing about them, Skillshare is an amazing online learning community filled to the brim with thousands of different classes across a ton of creative genres, from painting to digital illustration to journaling and career growth, and of course, video editing. And one of the best parts about that is that there are classes catered to every level of learning. So regardless of whether you're a newbie or a seasoned veteran, there's a class that's made for you. In my case, though, since I'm not a freshman in Premiere Pro, but definitely not a senior, I wanted to find a way to level up my editing skills to make my videos a bit more polished. One of my favorite classes I've ever taken on Skillshare is the Advanced Video Editing class taught by Elise, where she goes in depth on the essential graphics panel, seamless jump cuts, and curating short-form content from existing footage. Since I don't plan on stopping my creative journey or hiring an editor anytime soon, videos like these have been a great way for me to become a bit more skilled within the craft, but also be more efficient within the program itself. The next class I plan on taking is also from Elise, and it's all about color grading and correction in Premiere Pro, so I can get better at creating even more cozy and moody videos for you all. So if you guys would like to give Skillshare a go and maybe learn a new skill or even brush up on an old one, the first 500 people to join using my link get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. A huge thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. Alrighty, moving on to a few more questions. The next one I have is, how do you get such a beautiful aesthetic? First of all, thank you. I'm glad that my journals are a bit pleasing to look at. I don't exactly know how to specifically answer the question about aesthetic because I feel like it's catered so much to the individual person. But what I can say is that my quote-unquote aesthetic or style of journaling has evolved over time. I mentioned earlier in this video that if you were to go back and look at my very first bullet journal, it is a night and day difference to how I journal now. And that's because when I first started, I had no idea how I wanted my journal to look, the colors I wanted to use, the supplies, and eventually I kind of found my way, but that was honestly through trial and error. A lot of my aesthetic comes from my interests, whether that's books or movies or just colors in general. I am a neutral girly through and through. I mean, don't get me wrong, I do appreciate the pastels on occasion, but when it comes to creating art, I just gravitate towards neutral so much, so that tends to be the main mood that my journals and my spreads tend to give off more often than not. So truthfully, the best advice I can give is just to pay attention to the kinds of things that you gravitate towards when it comes to stationery or colors in general. Something fun that you could do is maybe go to a local stationery or art supply store and just peruse the aisles, kind of do a bit of a social experiment, I guess, and take note of any items that capture your attention, whether that's because of the style that they're in or the colors or just the vibe it gives off. It could literally be anything you want, and try to pay attention to the reasons why you like those sorts of items, and then maybe from that you can have a better understanding of the kind of aesthetic that you enjoy. I mean, it doesn't have to necessarily be about art. It could be a furniture store, or just walking around your neighborhood in general. But if you don't want to go outside, which I totally understand. I mean, Pinterest is always going to be your best friend. I am on Pinterest at least once a day, just looking for ideas and photos for my journals. So there are really so many ways that you can kind of analyze your quote unquote aesthetic, because I don't necessarily believe that there is, a set of 10 aesthetics in the world that you have to follow. I really enjoy the dark academia and cottagecore aesthetic, so I kind of combined them to create something that I wouldn't necessarily call like my own, because they're by no means original, but it's somewhat of a basis that I can work from when it comes to my journals. And then from there, I can maybe look for stationery that fits the vibe that I'm looking for, if that makes sense. I hope that helps. That was kind of a long-winded way of saying that it's totally up to you. It's a very personal experience, but thank you for enjoying the aesthetic of my journals. The next question someone asked is, what is your favorite art medium? Since I was a kid, and even up until now, my favorite art medium has always been painting. There's just something so calming, so therapeutic, so romantic about painting, and I just wish I had more time in my day-to-day to do so. Which is why whenever I have the chance to combine journaling and painting, I always try to take it, but I don't do it as often as I want because it does take a long time. My longest journal spread or monthly setup from last year was the May Galaxy, because I literally painted for hours just to complete it, but it also ended up being my favorite monthly spread I've ever done. So, it was definitely a give and a take situation. I just wish that I had more time to do so. I think if I wasn't dedicating so much time to journaling, I would definitely be painting. Alrighty, the next question someone asked is, can you show your workspace? Yes, I can. I'll insert a photo here of what it currently looks like. I feel like this is never going to be fully finished. It's always going to be a work in progress. But for now, this is definitely the best it has ever looked. It is all parts gothic and cozy and dark academia. I absolutely love it. It is just a perfect mix of productivity and creativity for me. This is not only the space where I journal and film the videos that you are currently watching, but it is also the space where I do a lot of my small business duties, packing orders, stuff like that. Like I mentioned earlier, if you're ever interested in seeing more, behind the scenes of my day-to-day and my semi-creative life, all of that is always going to be on Patreon, at least for now, until I eventually get around to filming another studio vlog. Alrighty, and the final question for today's video. What do you think are your best and worst habits with journaling? I feel like the answers to this question kind of go hand in hand a little bit, but we'll start off with the worst habit for me, in my opinion. Is that I do tend to be a little bit too perfectionist when it comes to my journal spreads, because I have conditioned myself so much that I'm going to post, a spread on Instagram that I feel like anything that I create needs to be social media worthy, social media ready. And sometimes that could end up turning into creative burnout. With that being said, though, I feel like I have slowly gotten better at being a little bit less perfectionist when it comes to journaling. Especially last year, I saw probably the biggest change in my mindset when it comes to that. I definitely feel a lot less intimidated by social media than I have in a really long time. Which brings us into, I would say, my best habit currently for journaling, and that has just been to journal for me. As simplistic as that sounds, that was a concept that I have kind of struggled with up until last year's bullet journal, constantly feeling like I needed to journal how everyone else was and do the same themes and use the same layouts that just would never work for me, but everyone else was doing them, and it seems like this is the norm for bullet journaling, so I probably need to do the same thing. Once I took the time to actually sit down and understand what I want my journal to mean to me, what I want it to be used for, I started having a better relationship with the journal itself. I felt like I wasn't putting myself into this cookie cutter box anymore. I started experimenting with more fun and interesting layouts and themes, and it just became so much more than just journaling for me. So once I kind of stopped putting these almost metaphorical restraints on my journaling creativity, the better my relationship with journaling actually became. So I definitely feel like I've healed that part of myself. I just kind of got to work on not being so hard on myself in terms of the perfectionist aspect. I'm kind of calling that my journaling alter ego, I guess. I just need to not be so hard on myself and feel like a spread isn't good enough or that it needs to be good enough to post on Instagram in order for it to be worthy of creating, if that makes sense. Because sometimes I think of a spread idea or I want to start journaling this certain thing, but I hold myself back because I feel like, this is not something that I could post on Instagram, or this isn't something that I could really share with anybody. I really need to remind myself that even though I've figured out my journaling style, at the end of the day, this is all for me. And everything else that gets added on top of that is just the sprinkles, the cherry on top of the sundae. But it's not the reason I started journaling, and it shouldn't be the reason that I continue to do so. Alrighty, with all of that being said, I think those are all the questions that I have for today's little Q&A video. I really hope you enjoyed. Maybe I answered a question that you've had for me, or if I didn't, feel free to always ask any sort of questions in the comments, regardless of what the video is. I hope to try to do these every so often, maybe like once a year or so. But have yet to do one of these videos since starting my YouTube, so I felt like it was very much long overdue. And of course, I hope you enjoyed this little journal with me session, watching me create these very aesthetic mood boards for some of my favorite reads. I definitely want to do more of these journal with me style videos that are a little bit more on the chill side. And not super structured like my usual monthly setups are. So let me know if that's something you would be interested in seeing. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!